What's up, everybody? Welcome, YouTube, to the post-show for the PlayStation 5 Future of Gaming that we just watched. My mind is freaking blown. I am exploded outside of my gourd. I realize there's wrong connotations to that, but where do we even begin, right? We were just looking at some of what the PS5 has to offer, and then they came right out and they showed the design of the console. And I guess that's the first thing I want to talk about is the design of the console, because it's really bold. It's really bold. And I think if I know the internet, there will be a lot of hate on it. You know, there will be a lot of people on the forums talking about, I don't like the white, the color's going to fade or something, or it's going to get yellow. White hardware sucks. It's hard to keep clean. People are going to say it looks like a fake futuristic thing that is like really cheap. Like people will say it's like a early 2000s idea of what the future looks like. And that's an opinion, you know, and that's fine. Here's my opinion on it. It's so distinct. It's the most distinct looking PlayStation that I've seen. The original PlayStation 3 was also really distinct, but it's the first time that they've launched with a white console, I think. I don't remember if the PlayStation 1 was originally like a gray console, but the first time, at least in the last 4 generations, that they have launched a white console. And you kind of knew it was going to happen with the DualShock controller and all that. You know, all the signs pointed to it. What I'm surprised most by with the console reveal is that there's 2 of them, which is nuts, because that, you know, everybody was saying this is Microsoft's strategy, right? You take the Series X, and then there's rumors of the Lockhart, you know, maybe a Series S. That's a cheaper way to get into the market and blow people away. So if you can't afford the more expensive one, you have that digital option, that digital only option. And I'm like deep into this stuff. I haven't heard a lick of information about PlayStation 5 doing a dual console design. Literally nobody saw that coming. And so that's an interesting strategy. So let's talk about that for a second, right? So this tells us a few things about the pricing. Even though they haven't revealed it yet, one of the big things this tells us is that don't expect the price of the regular PS5 with the 4K drive in it to be cheap. It will not be cheap. The only reason they would do something like this, create a digital-only console, is to cut on price for the people that are going to look at the price of the first one and be like, "Whoa, man, that's way too high," you know? So my reaction to this is what we're going to have is a PS5 that might launch at $599, and I think that they knew that maybe it had to, and they realized that during the PS3 era that kind of crushed them, so they had to come up with a second solution to that by making a digital-only console that they can maybe launch at $399. So that's my first thought. There is a disk drive really going to make up $200 worth of a launch price? That doesn't really make a lot of sense, does it? But it's possible, and it's also possible what they maybe do is they lower the space of the hard drive to lower on costs for the digital only. The 2 SKUs thing is always something that I've kind of thought was a little, I don't know. I always thought, you know, launch, be confident, launch with what you got. But I think the PS3 showed them that even though it was the most powerful option at the time, it didn't go so well. So I think they're really trying to stop that flood. What I can say about this, though, as long as we're talking about this design, is if they launch the big one at $499 and the little one at $399, I think they've won. I think there's zero way that Microsoft undercuts them on $399. Zero way. And I think there's a large potential for Microsoft to overcut the $499, mostly because of how expensive their graphics card and their CPU might be with that extra little boost. I think Sony played a really clever game of making the parts a little smaller, but a little more nimble, and then using that headroom to be aggressive on the pricing. So I don't know what to say about that. I dig the white. I do. And I think that the controller is definitely going to be the best one yet. The thing with controllers on the PlayStation side is that each one has been a significant upgrade from the last one. PS1 to PS2 controllers, I mean, it added analog sticks, you know. I realize that came in during the PS1 generation, but analog sticks required. PS2 to PS3, wireless. That's a huge thing. PS3 to PS4, I mean, think about when you were playing a PS3 controller. They were tiny, they were plastic, they were kind of uncomfortable, honestly. The buttons didn't really feel good. It really wasn't a good controller. It did what it needed to do for the time, but the 360 controller was pretty superior. And then PS3 to PS4, I mean, look at the PS4 controller. Super comfortable, a little tiny for some people's hands, but now all the buttons, the D-pad, everything feels so good. And this just looks like it's taking that, and again, you're moving into a new generation of, like, they're really working on that generational aspect. I think that's really cool for them to have. So, yeah, I mean, I'm excited for the design there. The pricing is the scary thing, but I think the digital-only edition will be really interesting. If you're still here, Mr. CheeseNet asks, will the digital have more space? Because that's the good thing about discs. One thing to know about discs, at least in this era, is that they no longer, like they used to, they no longer really save you any game space at all. A lot of the times they used to have the game on the disc, so of course it would just read the disc, and you wouldn't have to install the whole thing to your hard drive. But since the PlayStation 4, it's not discs aren't fast enough for them to read data off of. And certainly with the PS5, it'll be the same. The disc and the digital will share exactly the same space. You'll be playing Ratchet and Clank on the disc, it'll be 50 gigs. If you download it digitally, it'll be 50 gigs. So there's no longer an advantage there. Pretty much the only advantage right now of owning discs, there's kind of two big ones, is the ability to sell and trade your game, or to bring it over to a friend's house and have them play it, or share your game. And it's just, you physically own a copy of it. If the servers go down, it's not like you don't own the game anymore. If there's a mistake on the storefront, it's not like you can't buy the game or you don't own the game. It's all right there. You have the license. Of course, the downside is if the disc breaks, you're out of a license, unlike with digital, right? And the second big thing that sets it apart is the speed of download. So because it doesn't have to access the internet to download the game, it just accesses the disc to download the game. It, although I suppose the internet is needed for certain updates and stuff like that as well. It tends to download faster. So for that, I mean, it's a physical media thing. One thing to keep in mind though is that, like, a lot of people use their PlayStations as as an entertainment hub for their living room. And if the future is 4K, if people are starting to get 4K TVs and whatever, I mean, it'll certainly be the first 4K drive that I have. I don't know how many people are really buying 4K discs like they bought Blu-ray discs back in the day, but it's a potential, So yeah, those are the huge things to lead off with. But while we're here, we might as well start talking about some of the games that they launched, right? So I'm blown away, right? I think what are the downsides? What are the things that you didn't see that you wanted to see? That's an easy one to start off with, right? I mean, there's a lot of rumors about Silent Hill or Castlevania being shown. Nothing like that. Metal Gear Solid or Legend of Dragoon, nothing like that. God of War wasn't shown, which is, it makes sense. It's the one that's probably least furthest along out of Spider-Man and Horizon, the sort of the big three of the last couple of years. No new Uncharted. There were some rumors about the San Diego studio. No PlayStation All-Stars. No... But there were a lot of upsides to this conference. I actually think it was a really good conference, the way that they paced it and had things come out there. And they teased the console design as, like, throughout the whole thing. And they teased the UI a little bit too, which is cool. But the big show stealer, I think there were three. There were a lot of cool games. Hitman 3 was really cool. I mean, they showed off, like, Ratchet and Clank, which was really cool. They showed off a couple of indie games, which actually looked pretty interesting. A brand new IP at the start, which I'm trying to remember, like Project Altia or something like that, which is really cool. Let's look up a list here. Let's see. PS5 reveal games. Okay. So yeah, there were a lot of really cool games. Let's try and go over them a little bit, right? Cool. Let's head back down. Okay, so what are we looking at here? We started off with... Okay, sorry, I'm looking at this live stream and it's a little crazy. They started off with a Grand Theft Auto, which I thought was, I mean, basically get it out of the way early, because a lot of gamers are not going to want to hear that news. I don't know if there's people, I mean, there's people that are going to read, this is great financially for Rockstar, but that's pretty much it, right? Most people have played GTA if they want to play GTA. They gave it out for free on Epic Games a couple of weeks ago. Like, it's not. This is purely a monetary thing, and that's why it's kind of like, come on, dude. Like, stop re-releasing this game. People are pretty mad right now at Rockstar for passing by the 7 years of PlayStation 4 without releasing anything except Red Dead Redemption 2. And I realize games are taking longer and longer to develop now, but people have been waiting for GTA 6 for a long time. And one of the reasons it's assumed it's not been shown is because GTA 5 makes so much money. Why work on GTA 6? You could just keep milking GTA Online, you know? So I think they were trying to get that out of the way at the start so people would forget about it. I didn't really see much of it in the sizzle reel at the end either, which is kind of interesting. So they start off with that, and then they went right after that as a palate cleanser into Spider-Man 2. And this is one of the big games of the stream. I don't think it's the biggest, mostly because you didn't see too much of it. The largest part of this that I think is really cool that they announced was that Spider-Man is coming holiday 2020, which means it's coming out a lot earlier than some people suggested or thought, and it's most likely a launch game for the PlayStation 5. If you were not aware of like the sales numbers of the first Spider-Man game, it was insane how much power it had in the market. And it's to its date, it's one of the best. I think it's maybe the second best selling PlayStation game of all time, or the second best selling PS4 game at the very least. I know Uncharted 4 is up there a lot too, but like 15 million copies. Like, I'm talking like real big numbers on that for an exclusive game, only sellable on the PS4. That's pretty huge. So yeah, they showed off Miles Morales and a lot of really cool aspects of that. And I'm very excited, right? Because if you played the first game, they teased Miles Morales, but you never got to play him. And it seems like now we have this cool shift with the Miles Morales character. I've seen a lot of Peter Parker. I've played a lot of Peter Parker. I want to explore this character. I don't read the comics, really. You know, so this is a character that, you know, I was introduced to, you know, a couple of years ago. And the media that's come out makes me want to play it. You know, the Into the Spider-Verse was really cool for that kind of stuff. Project Athia. Thank you for that. Yeah, Project Athia is really cool. After that, they showed off Gran Turismo. So I really think they front-loaded this whole thing, and that's a great way to get people to stay till the end, because you're just like, whoa, like they released like their hugest franchises right out of the gate, which is really cool. The Gran Turismo game is, again, it's just another juggernaut. It's such a big game for them that the studio that handles it, that's all they do. They don't make another game. They are the Gran Turismo studio. That's Polyphony Digital. And they also haven't released a game in like 8 years besides GT Sport, which is sort of a side game while they were working on Gran Turismo 7. So Gran Turismo 7 is going to make a lot of people happy, especially with all of that. One big thing I noticed in this conference, and something that I wanted to touch on, is the lack of VR, I guess, messaging. You know, the Gran Turismo Sport had a VR mode, and it was widely expected that maybe GT7 would expand on that, but instead we got nothing of the sort. We got no nods to VR, nothing that even showed that there would be a VR mode like there was in GT Sport. And the same thing with the Resident Evil game, which we'll take a look at earlier. Let's keep going down the list of the games that they announced. And again, if you want to shout out a game or talk about a game, just let me know. Because right after Gran Turismo, they went into Ratchet and Clank. The new Ratchet and Clank game, Rift Apart. To me, this was one of the most, like, the gameplay in this game was probably the most spectacular out of any of the games in the showcase. And it really deserves to be applauded for that, because they said at the start, you know, this is to show off games that are, specifically to show off games that are only playable on PlayStation 5 because of the hardware that's in the PS5 that is unmatched by any of the competitors, right? And the only thing basically that's unmatched by any of the competitors is the SSD, and we've heard a lot about that recently. It's the throughput of the SSD and the I/O, and just being able to process so much data that you can almost use the SSD as like virtual RAM, means that you can load in data, like load in game assets in like blistering speeds to the extent where you're doing things that were never possible in the game before. And the biggest example of this is that Ratchet and Clank game. So if you haven't seen it and you're like, oh, SSD, maybe the PS5 should be made out of SSD. So maybe go look at the Ratchet and Clank demonstration, because what they did was they've created a game where there's portals that open up all around the game, and you walk through the portals and instantly another world is generated out of that. You can pull a world around you, and it shows this to me really shows off what the SSD can do. And I really don't think that a game like that would be playable on any other console or the PC. It had to be designed for the ground up. And so these are the really exciting things, the assets that can load in that quickly, or the amount of detail that you can get. And of course, a lot of that is, the graphics card that has to handle, the textures and the shading and all that sort of stuff. But just being able to get things loaded that quickly is going to it's clearly done a lot. And it's got so right here it says pretty amazing dimension hopping concept. We leap between a pirate world and a cyberpunk city. This could be the power of the SSD at work, which I think it definitely is. And one great thing about this conference, as we're talking about it, is the amount of gameplay that was shown. They really heard the cries of, we don't like cinematic experiences. We like gameplay. So that's a big thing. And we saw gameplay, which is awesome. So again, talking about front loading, we had GTA, who cares? But we had Spiderman, we had Gran Turismo, we had Ratchet and Clank. After Ratchet and Clank, we immediately saw this new Square Enix AAA game from a second party studio, right? Called Project Athia. It was made by Luminous Productions. These guys developed Final Fantasy 15. So, I mean, the combat in the game was so good, and Final Fantasy 7 Remake was based on the Final Fantasy 15 combat system. And I mean, people have been really into this, really into the gameplay that's been coming out of that studio. And it seems like they brought that sort of style and just took it up another notch with this Project Athia. It's a sort of a real-time combat gameplay action game. It says here they bright, vibrant, natural environments, and a PS5 exclusive. So when people are talking about there's no way third-party developers are going to make a PS5 exclusive game, because why waste the resources when you could make it multi-platform? I really think that what the PS5 can do in terms of the SSD and the being able to like make game worlds fluid and happen and be in the now, makes it really enticing and appealing to do an exclusive game for them, especially if there's money passing hands, if Sony pays them a certain amount to cover up for the loss of not being on the Xbox. What I think this really shows, beyond the fact that it looked like a really cool game, is it spells some trouble for the Series X, because one of the arguments is you buy a Series X because it's more powerful, because it can handle third parties better than the PlayStation, right? Like, if you don't care about PS exclusives, it's all about third parties. If you only care about third parties, then play the Xbox. Obviously, there's no reason not to. Well, now there's a reason not to. And regardless of that, if that's how you feel, that's going to be resonating with people all throughout the internet as they argue to the death. Miles Morales, there was a trailer for a game called Stray, which was a game about a cat set in a sci-fi universe by the indie developers Annapurna Interactive. We actually saw 2 Annapurna published games in this stream, which is very interesting. They've gotten a lot of clout in the industry. I've seen a lot more of their stuff recently. So if you're into indies, this showcase was really cool for indies. There's not much to say about this game. It was weird, and there was a cat involved, and I love kitty cats. The art style is something that sticks out to me always with this stuff. Whereas I don't think this is going to turn any heads. I do think that it's an interesting game. They take a look at the PlayStation 5 after a little break, the controller, the DualSense. We already know a lot about the DualSense already. Nothing else really needed to be said, but they gave a little bit of an in-depth, like, sort of turnaround on it. A lot of people are going to be not happy with the fact that there aren't triggers on the back, because they never showed the back before. But here's what they did confirm, and this is stuff we mostly already knew. Adaptive triggers. And so this is a little bit different than the triggers that we've had, the adaptive style triggers that we've had in other games. I mean, even the Xbox X controller has these adaptive triggers, but it's very different things. Because what this is talking about is, instead of like rumble triggers, which is pretty much the technology people use right now, having rumbles in the triggers to sort of simulate different gameplay tensions, we're talking about a trigger that they can code it to manually, like, switch to different types of tension. So when you're pulling the back triggers, depending on how much tension you want. It's obviously it's harder to press them down, but what that does, even in a really subtle way, is differentiate between different types of weapons in games. So you're trying to do a bow and arrow. Well, when you're doing the bow and arrow animation, obviously it's really tough at that first part of the pull. So of course, maybe it's really tough to hold down on the triggers, and as you start to pull back and it gets easier, maybe it lightens up on the trigger. So it really starts to feel like you're pulling a bow and gets you more immersed. Whereas maybe with a certain types of guns, handguns might be really hard to do like a revolver, but machine guns maybe might be easier to do. So they showed us that the adaptive triggers, the ray tracing hardware of the PS5. Well, that's not the DualShock or the DualSense. They showed us the built-in microphone, the 3D audio that they were doing. They showed us the motion sensors, and then of course the audio jack makes a comeback, which was a big deal for a lot of people. Herman Holst comes out to talk about a new game exclusive to the PlayStation from one of their partner developers, and this is where Housemarque came out. So we talked about this during the stream. Of course, you can see that if you want on YouTube or on my Twitch VOD. But the stream was, the Housemarque are the developers that do, top-down twin-stick shooters like Matterfall that came out recently, like Dead Nation, they did Resogun as well. They did a lot of those cool kind of indie arcade shooters. And what we see here is a real big jump from indie style with like a really cool retro sci-fi theme to a AAA over-the-shoulder camera, third-person, like almost RPG-esque sci-fi game. It kind of reminded me of Dead Space a little bit, and I know people were really looking forward to something like that. And so this is another new IP. This, along with Project Athia, are probably maybe my two most looked forward to new IPs of this presentation. And so, yeah, the name of the game is called Returnal. I don't know if you're a pun guy, you might like that. There you go. I thought it was pretty cool. We saw a couple of other games. This doesn't have the. Oh no, that's Returnal. Okay. After that, we saw Sumo Digital, and it's been a while since we've seen the Little Big Planet franchise. But what happened is they announced Sackboy. It's called Sackboy: A Big Adventure. It looks like they took the idea of Little Big Planet, and everything looks like Little Big Planet, but it doesn't have the title. What they've done is they've made it into sort of an open world Super Mario-esque kind of playstyle, which I think is perfect because that game really needed something to help build it up and revive it. Little Big Planet 3 didn't really do so well. They really tried to mess with the 3D, 2D aspect of it, being able to shift between different layers, and they really expanded the amount of layers. But the best thing that you can do with a game like this is really redesign the way that you're going to play it if you want it to resonate with gamers again. And it looks like they've done that. So the big problem with Little Big Planet 3 for me, with the gameplay, was a little rough. The netcode was a little rough, and the levels were a little roughly designed. So I hope they can get over some of those hurdles. But I am excited to see Sackboy, who we haven't seen all PlayStation 4 gen, come back on the PlayStation 5. It was very cool. Next up after that, from developer Lucid, was the Destruction Derby series. Except this time it looked like Twisted Metal. What we had is a basically arena combat game, not only with vehicles, but it looked like you could get outside of your vehicle and of course do sort of hand-to-hand PvP combat. And so it sort of looked like Twisted Metal and Rocket League. It had a very interesting aesthetic to it. It looked very physics-based, and it was very cool. And this is a game that when I first saw the trailer, the first part of it, I was like, eh. And then as it got into the trailer and you started to see more of the gameplay, I was like, you know what, this could actually be really fun as like an arena multiplayer game. It could have a really good online following if it's good, if it feels good to play. So that game was called Destruction All-Stars, basically crushing the dream of PlayStation All-Stars. Then we saw a really cool third-person adventure game that reminded me of a sort of Zelda-esque art style and gameplay. Definitely the camera position of like an Ocarina of Time kind of deal, or even sort of Breath of the Wild, or Twilight Princess or something like that. And this was called Kena Bridge of Spirits. This here maybe might go to my indie game of the show. Sort of excited. Like I know my most excited new IP is the Returnal or the Project Athia, but the indie games, there a lot of them did not appeal to me, but some of them did appeal to me. And this one I think could be a really cool slam dunk for Nintendo audiences on the PlayStation console, or people that are people that want a little more cartoony, a little more colorful kind of deal, and not everything that's just so dark and desperate. You know what I'm saying? So that's what happened there. We saw a little indie title featuring some animals in high school called Goodbye Volcano High, coming in 2021. This one kind of slid past the radar for me. I have nothing really to say about it, except for it seemed to be targeted towards younger people. It seemed to be a little bit of a, sort of anime-inspired, kind of thing. So if you're a tween and you're into that kind of like, high school aesthetic, and you kind of want to, role play a little bit like that with those characters, that one might be cool. But it's definitely it's maybe not something I'm going to be into as much. We then went from that into Oddworld Soulstorm. So Oddworld was a game that came out a while ago. It had a very interesting aesthetic with like an octopus main character named Abe. And it seemed to be kind of a sleeper hit to some people, a cult hit, because of the comedy and the style of it. I remember it came out on PlayStation Plus as a free game, and I did try it out, I think, for the first level. I don't remember playing the whole game, so I don't know what my thoughts were about it. But I do know that what they did is it looks like they took 4 fans of this game, the concept of it, and then just ramped it up to 11. So if you were into the first game, this looks like like a true generational leap for that, which is kind of cool. Next up is another one of my most anticipated games that they showed. So they showed off Ghostwire Tokyo. This is a game we already seen before, back at last year's E3 2019. And what it revealed was sort of it showed a lot more of the world and the gameplay than we've ever seen before. And what I saw was the gameplay was what really drove me through the trailer. It showed a lot of really cool magical powers, like warped environments, control-esque physics-based kind of things, a lot of magic, and all set in sort of a cityscape, like a destroyed, or not even a destroyed, but like a cityscape. It kind of reminded me of Cyberpunk in its design, but I thought it was really cool, and it's something I think you should keep your eye on if you're into that sort of weird, neo-modern, sort of futuristic aesthetic. That one looks really good, and that's from Bethesda, as the publisher. We saw a game called Sword and Sorcery. This one I don't remember quite as much. It's from the developer Super Brothers. You're tasked with carving out a future for your people while haunted by oblivion, but filled with dreams, according to the trailer. It looks like a third-person game where you control a ship of some kind on alien planets looking for a new home. So again, just a very interesting like indie presence in this event, but I really liked how they smushed it up between really big, AAA first-party or third-party studio games. Then they showed off Godfall, which is one of the I think maybe the first PS5 game that was ever announced. And they showed off more gameplay of this game. My thought is it's a launch game, I don't imagine it's going to be very long. It looks like it's going to be kind of short. I don't imagine it's going to have a great narrative. What I'm really hoping that it does, and I think this is all it really needs to do, is because it's from like not really a well-known studio, and it's a launch title, I don't think expectations are really high for it. But if they can nail the gameplay, I think that you've got a really good chance of not only a lot of early adopters picking it up because of the console there, but creating an IP that maybe later on could be a cool thing if you kind of stick with it. What it is, if you haven't seen it yet, is sort of it's a hack and slash action adventure. Really reminds me of like Diablo. The camera's a little closer than that, but so sort of like Darksiders a little bit. It looks kind of framey to me. The visuals are really good though, and I'm not sure if that's just a result of the stream or not. But what I want to do is keep my eye on that, see what the reviews are on that, and if they announce a co-op mode to that, I think it could do really well, especially if you've got a local co-op and online co-op would be really great in a game like that. We went to the next Annapurna game called Solar Ash. Set in a sci-fi universe. They didn't really show much of this game at all, but the little tiny bit of like design, like the art design of this game was incredible to me. It was it was something that I really connected with. It had that really nice, sort of vibrant, sci-fi, pastel, No Man's Sky-esque sort of thing going on with it. And that, for some reason, really is something I really enjoy. So I think we keep our eye on that. That's a 2021 game. After that, we looked at Hitman 3. So Hitman is definitely maybe one of the most underrated franchises out there. A lot of people haven't played it, and they don't understand that Hitman is like one of the most adaptive, I guess, games that you can play that lets you choose your gameplay style in so many ways. And it looks great, and the writing is great, and the missions are great, and it's got this cool online feature. There's just a lot of really cool things about it that are really a lot of gamers have slept on. And Hitman 3 just looked like, to me, one of the best visuals of any of the games I saw here today. So keep an eye out for that. That will come out in January 2021, and it says it will conclude the trilogy of Hitman games. So that's very interesting. I wonder what they're going to do after that. Then we looked at an Astrobot game from Sony Japan. And this is where it really started to hit me throughout the whole showcase that nothing VR was talked about, like zero VR presence. I realized it was a game showcase, but when you reveal a new Astrobot game, you kind of expect, that it was created as a VR title. This one was called, it looks like Astrobot's Playhouse. And the first Astrobot, if you haven't played it, is a really, really comprehensive platformer, puzzle maker, or puzzle game, and it's really similar to Super Mario, and it's a very great game. It really great reviews, 10 out of 10s, 9 out of 10s across the board when it came out, and it's one of the best VR titles to date, which is why it kind of confused me that this was not confirmed for VR, this sequel, I suppose. And I wonder if what's happening here is, until they get the next VR system out, what they want to do is try to get people that don't play VR into the franchises. So when you look at something like the new Resident Evil that's coming up, or this Astrobot game that's coming up, or what was the other game? The Gran Turismo game, and they don't have VR, maybe what they're trying to do is get people, like a lot of people didn't play Astrobot because they couldn't, because they didn't have a PSVR. But now if they get into the franchise, that'll entice them to start playing some of those VR titles. And give them a little space to develop for the PSVR 2 if it comes out. But I'm excited for that one. There was another indie game called The Little Devil Inside, which was a sort of third-person action game. You fight monsters. It looked kind of like a storybook, people are saying here, and it was sort of a fantasy indie game. Looked pretty cool. Fable-ish, if I remember it correctly. Then we saw 2K21. Nothing much to say about that, except the sweat looked so real. It looked very, very good. And I like that they kept it really short. There's a lot of games that people love in the world, but don't like seeing on stream. And I hate to say it, but, sports games, they sell so many copies. They're obviously so popular, FIFA and whatever. But as soon as you put that on a live stream of a game showcase, there are so many people that are like, this is so boring, that it kind of ruins the show for them. And I really like that you acknowledge that. Everybody knows the game is coming. There's not really much to talk about anymore. It's 2K21. How many of these games have they had? Like at least 20, I want to say, or more. Maybe 20, maybe 21, maybe more than that. I don't know. Is there an NBA like 99? I really don't remember when they started this series. My point is that people know what these games are. You don't have to spend that long on them, and they didn't. So that was really cool. But if you're into that, there you go. It's coming up. Then a very kid-oriented game called Bug Snacks. Kind of, comedic dialogue, very cartoony, and really seemed like, I don't know. It was really hard to tell what the game was about. But you eat bugs, and the bugs turn your arms into different types of food. It seemed like a really kid-oriented game for launch, so that when, if you're buying the system for a younger kid, you can buy them that Bug Snacks game. I don't think the title of it is great. I think it kind of makes it sound like vaporware. It makes it sound like some of those games that came out on the Wii that nobody knew what the hell they were. But it's really interesting. We're getting closer to the end of the show. What happened after that basically destroyed my body and mind. And that was the Demon Souls remake reveal by Bluepoint. Heavily rumored. We even talked about it at the pre-show, which you can watch on my YouTube channel. But Demon Souls is maybe the most deserved of the Souls games right now, of course, because of how old it is, to get this remaster. It's the clunkiest of them. It's the least accessible. Nobody owns a PS3 anymore. It's not available really on PS4. It's not, you can't play it. And because of that, people have just been, and the servers are down on it now because they shut down the servers for the old one. They're just so, like, it's impossible for people to get their hands on it. And people have been working for years on an emulator to play this game because they love it so much. And it's such a great game. It's one of the best games of all time. I'm going to come out and say that. It's one of my favorite games of all time. And if you haven't played it, you know, even if you don't like Bloodborne or you don't like Dark Souls that much, go play Demon Souls. There's enough to set it apart, but it is also one of the best RPGs I've ever played. It is difficult, but it is a little bit easier, in my opinion, than Dark Souls. So I think more accessible, and it's a shame people haven't played it yet. The way this looked was incredible. I've seen what they did, Bluepoint, with the Shadow of the Colossus remake, and I've seen what they can do with games, but this to me is no doubt their best. It looked like a different game almost. It looked like the same game, but a different game. And I go watch my reaction. There's a clip out there somewhere. Go watch my reaction on that. There's no clip. I'm going to make that clip. A full remake worked on by Bluepoint Games. They didn't show any date on that one, which is interesting for me. But maybe they're going to... So a few of these games, while we're talking about it, seem to me like they weren't showing the dates. And what that means to me is... or the dates or gameplay of it. And what that means to me is that each one of these games I expect are maybe a little farther out, number one, or number two, in the case of Spider-Man, I expect them to do a deep dive reveal by itself. You know, so you're not watching a big game showcase. What you're watching is a Spider-Man event that happens, for example. Maybe a couple of weeks or a couple of months down the line, Sony's been really good at drip feeding the content out to make people starved for content, so that when a stream like that happens, it gains so many viewers that it's just the marketing is out of control. So I expect that to be the case for Demon Souls as well, that there will be a deep dive into the Demon Souls remake for gameplay, although I know that's less desired than like a Spider-Man deep dive. And some of these other games I expect as well as we get closer to their release. So anyway, that's my high point. That's my favorite part of the show was the Demon Souls. You sort of expected it, but you weren't sure, and then when it came out, it looked better than you could have imagined, which is incredible. So go watch that. Then we came out with Deathloop, something we've already seen before from Arcane Studios, who did Dishonored. Not much to say about it. It looked very cool. They did a kind of extended gameplay section of it. Looked a little lower res than like a Dishonored game, but it looked like the gameplay was really fun. It's about a rival assassin set in a time loop, as the name hints. So a lot of time stuff going on with that. Very cool. Every time you die, the loop resets. The environments look really Dishonored, but the setting seems more contemporary from what I'm reading here. It's all set on an island where folks are having a never-ending party. You've got 8 targets to take out before midnight, it seems, which is similar to Dishonored Assassin's gameplay. So a lot of people seem excited for that. Very interesting. As we're getting to the end, we have a couple more trailers that we showed. What we saw after that also blew my mind. And so close to the Demon Souls reveal. It seems really clear that, you know, the way to do these showcases is to keep the surprises, obviously, at the end, and then keep the things that are kind of expected but huge at the front. And so that's what we've done, except for what's at the very end of the showcase, which we'll talk about. So the big surprises of Demon Soul was immediately followed up by this huge surprise for Resident Evil 8. And you started looking at it and you were like, I don't know what this is. This is Silent Hill, or this is a new horror game, because the story didn't really feel like Resident Evil. I mean, I kind of got that. Let me rephrase that. It felt like Resident Evil for sure, but it was surprising. You know, it looked kind of different from what people know as Resident Evil, right? But as you started to get into it more and more, the way that the dialogue came in, the visuals, this is a game that looked really good visually in terms of textures and stuff. We have a sort of a really cool folky influenced Resident Evil coming out. No date on this one either, I don't believe. But what they did show is that for people that are really worried about the Resident Evil timeline not really going back to the characters that we know and love, indeed, Chris Redfield has come back, and of course I lost my mind at that too. But this time, you know, maybe in a role that it looks like here says might be villainous. Keep your eye on that. Almost to the end here, we have a new game coming out that I thought was part of a franchise that I knew until it kept going along, and I kept guessing and guessing at what it was, like a new Kojima game or a new Horizon game. But it appears like it's none of either. It looks like another new IP, and this one was also really good. You gotta like really applaud the new IPs that they're revealing. We got at least 3 or 4 like AAA big new IPs and a lot of new indie ones that looked awesome. And this was one of them, right? This was called Pragmata. It seemed like sort of a like it says here, it's either set in space or a twisted version of Earth, but it's a very very cool sci-fi moon walking mind-bending game. Again, go watch the trailer. It's kind of hard to describe that one. And then suddenly, finally, at the end, what we got is a trailer for Horizon Zero Dawn 2. I can't tell you how great of a game Horizon Zero Dawn 1 is. We're playing through it right now on our channel. Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. Sorry, I didn't read that. I was reading my article, and my eyes were not on the screen. But yeah, so what we saw at the end was Horizon Zero Dawn 2. Horizon Zero Dawn 1 is such a great game, and there are like some little things that they could have improved upon, and this one just looks so good. It's definitely what's going to be the big puncher for the PlayStation system as it comes out. Spider-Man and Horizon are going to sell millions of systems. It's just that simple, and it's really, really... I mean, I'm so excited for it. That's all I have to say about that. The environments look fantastic. It looks like the robot design. The really cool thing about sequels, if you do them right, is they have such a great potential. Horizon 2 has an awesome potential because they've already done enough of it. Like if it continues the storyline, they already have so much of the world crafted that they can make it even bigger. All they have to do is, spend the time creating, adding on to the world instead of scrapping it, and instead of having to start from the beginning. All they have to do is add on to the variety of robots in the system, and suddenly it's, you have the ones. I saw some robots that I haven't seen from the first one, which means we're gonna have just this huge variety of not only gameplay systems but different enemies to attack, and then it just looks gorgeous. They've added in like an underwater combat system, which looks really awesome, and the narrative is still there, and I just don't have anything else to say except for that is if you're not playing Horizon Zero Dawn 2, you are outside of your mind. After that, they showed off the PlayStation. They showed off the PlayStation 5, the way that it looked. They were really teasing it, and they basically did the Microsoft event of last year's E3, but right now. And I gotta say, I think it was a great decision to wait. I know people have been angry and people have been depressed and just like, "What? Show me the system!" Like, stop playing around with it, But the fact that Microsoft revealed their console so long ago makes it seem old. Just in marketing terms, it just makes it seem like old news. And releasing it this much closer to the launch of the system makes it seem like this is it. This is the new thing. This is fresh. And I think this is going to do a lot for them. So they held off on it, and we talked about this at the start of the show, so we don't have to talk about this too much, but they had 2 consoles, the digital console, which I expect to be cheaper, and a kind of really shocking news. And I think this might confirm even more so that there will be an Xbox digital version. I don't think Microsoft's going to want Sony to undercut them on this. So anyway, that was it. That was the PlayStation Games Showcase. Tell me your comments. Like, let's talk about it. This is exciting. This is a really exciting time. This looks like the best console shift that we've had. We're opening with games. The console launch for PlayStation 4 was not that good. I mean, and it rarely is because people are still developing games. But it looks like we've got a Spider-Man 2 game, a Horizon game on the horizon, and a lot of other cool games that are like, it seems poised to come out really strongly. The design of it's really bold. I think it's going to piss some people off. I think that there's going to be color variations, and that, that's how they're going to stem that tide. Obviously, there's going to be a black version of the console later down the line. Obviously, there's going to be, exclusive versions of it that they're going to bundle. So I wouldn't worry about it too much if you don't like the white, and that's going to be true of the controller as well. But the default being white is really bold, and it really sets them apart, I think, from the other consoles. So I think they're playing the right game here. Honestly, I really do. I think they're making the right moves. Tell me what you think. What you think about it. If you're watching this on YouTube, thank you for watching this discussion here. We'll comment. We'll get back on it. This is the post show. If you wanted to see the reactions to the press conference, it's also going to be up on YouTube as well as on my Twitch VOD, twitch.tv/MechaWill. Go ahead and follow me there if you can, because we do a lot of this kind of stuff, and we're having a lot of fun with our PlayStation exclusive month. So thank you guys for watching. Make sure to like and give me a comment. And if you haven't subscribed already, because, we got a lot more stuff on the way. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys for the next one.